husband told me he married me because he couldn't marry my sister. He said it at his company Christmas party, drunk on whiskey and years of pretending. We were standing by the bar when his colleague Brett mentioned how lucky he was to have such a beautiful wife. Yeah, well, you should see her sister, my husband Dylan said, swaying slightly. Now that's the real prize. This one's just the consolation. Brett laughed nervously. I stood there holding my cocktail, feeling my whole world tilt. What did you just say? I asked. Dylan turned to me like he'd forgotten I was there. Nothing, baby. Just guy talk. But Brett was already backing away, mumbling about finding his wife. You said I'm a consolation prize. You're being sensitive. You said you wished you'd married Luna. He shrugged. Actually shrugged. Can't marry your wife's sister. That's not how it works. So you married me instead? Someone had to marry you first. He said it like it was obvious. Like it was a plan. 8 years. 8 years of marriage, and he was telling me I was the pathway to my younger sister. We need to leave, I said. Party's just getting started. We're leaving now. In the car, he tried to backtrack. I didn't mean it how it sounded. How did you mean it? Luna's gorgeous. Everyone knows it. You know it. But I chose you. Because you couldn't choose her. That's not... Look, when I met you both that summer at your parents' place, Luna was 18. You were 23. It made more sense. What made more sense? He sighed like I was being difficult. Dating you. She was too young. Your parents would have freaked out. But you were perfect. Same family, same genetics, just more appropriate. Same genetics. Like I was a placeholder with the right DNA. Did you ever love me? I asked. Of course I love you. You're my wife. That's not an answer. What do you want me to say? That I never noticed how beautiful your sister is? That I never wondered what if? Everyone wonders. Not about their wife's sister. Not for 8 years. We drove in silence until we got home. I went straight to our bedroom, started pulling out suitcases. What are you doing? He asked from the doorway. What does it look like? You're overreacting, so I find your sister attractive. So what? I married you. I had kids with you. He grabbed my arm. Stop being dramatic. You can't leave over this. Watch me. And go where? Your parents? They'll ask why. What will you tell them? That I think Luna's pretty? They'll say you're being childish. I'll tell them the truth. That you admitted you married me as a consolation prize. I was drunk. Drunk words are sober thoughts. My phone rang. It was Luna. Hey, are you okay? Brett's wife just called me. Said something weird happened at Dylan's party. I put her on speaker. I'm fine. She said Dylan was talking about me. Something about wishing... I don't know. She wouldn't say exactly. Dylan's face went pale. Luna, what exactly did she tell you? I asked. Just that Dylan said something inappropriate about marrying the wrong sister. Is that true? I looked at Dylan. Why don't you ask him? Dylan? Luna's voice was sharp now. What did you say? Nothing. It was taken out of context. What context makes that okay? Luna asked. You're married to my sister. You have 2 kids. What is wrong with you? Everyone always fawns over you, Dylan said suddenly. At every family event, every dinner. Luna the model, Luna the influencer, Luna the perfect one, and I'm stuck with... He stopped. Stuck with what? I said. Finish the sentence. With someone who'll never measure up, he said quietly. Luna gasped through the phone. You piece of shit. My sister is worth 10 of you. She's brilliant, kind, funny. She's the one who helped you get your job. She's the one who supported you through your dad's death. She's raising your children practically alone. And you're stuck? Luna, Dylan started. No, don't you ever speak to me again. Don't look at me. Don't come to family events. You're disgusting. She paused. Lily, do you need somewhere to stay? I'm packing now. Come here. The kids can have the spare room. Luna, this isn't your problem, Dylan said. It became my problem when you made me part of your sick fantasy, Luna shot back. What else do you do? Stare at my photos? Compare us? Pretend she's me? Stop, Dylan said. No, I want to know. How long have you been pretending my sister is me? Since the wedding? Since the honeymoon? Every time you— Stop! Dylan shouted. I'm hanging up, Luna said. Lily, I'll leave the door unlocked and Dylan? I'm telling everyone. Mom, Dad, cousins, everyone. They should know what kind of man you are. She hung up. Dylan stared at me. This is your fault. My fault? You had to make a big deal about it. Now she hates me. Your whole family will hate me. You did this. You admitted you married me to get close to my sister. I never said that exactly. You said I was a consolation prize. You said you're stuck with me. You said I'll never measure up. Because it's true! He exploded. You're ordinary. You're boring. You're not special. Luna lights up every room. You just exist in them. I stopped packing. Looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time in years. Thinning hair, soft middle, angry little eyes. Do you want to know the truth? Yes, I do. I've known for 3 years that you settled for me. I felt it every time you suggested I try Luna's workout routine. Every time you asked why I couldn't dress more like her. Every family dinner when your eyes followed her around the room while you barely looked at me. I normalized it because I thought that's what marriage was. Making peace with being second choice. But hearing you say it out loud to your coworker, admitting you're stuck with me, that broke something I can't fix. His face went completely white. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. I went back to packing, folding clothes with shaking hands. He just stood there watching me empty our closet into suitcases like he couldn't believe this was actually happening. Guest room, I said without looking at him. Sleep there tonight. I need to finish this. For once, he didn't argue. I heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway, heard the guest room door close. The silence felt heavy, but also clean somehow, like I could finally breathe without his presence weighing on me. My phone rang exactly 9 minutes later. Luna's name lit up the screen and I answered immediately. Mom and Dad are driving up tomorrow morning, she said, her voice tight with anger. I already called them. I told them everything Brett's wife told me and they're coming first thing. You won't have to explain alone. The relief hit me so hard I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. Thank you, I managed to say. She told me she loved me and hung up to keep calling family members. I spent the rest of the night moving through our bedroom like I was haunting it. Every framed photo on the dresser showed moments I thought were real, but now felt fake. Our wedding picture where Dylan's smile looked genuine. The hospital photos with our newborns where he seemed proud. Vacation shots where we looked happy. I left them all there because they belonged to a version of me who didn't know the truth yet. I packed practical things, kids' clothes and favorite toys and school supplies. I took my laptop and important documents from the desk drawer. I left behind 8 years of building a life with someone who was always wishing I was someone else. The kids woke up around 7 asking about breakfast. I made pancakes and kept my voice steady when I told them we were going to stay at Aunt Luna's for a few days. My daughter asked if it was like a sleepover, and I said yes, exactly like that. My son wanted to know why, and I used the careful language you learn from other divorced parents, saying Mommy and Daddy need some space to figure things out. He asked if we were fighting, and I said sometimes grown-ups need time apart to think, which wasn't a lie, but wasn't the whole truth either. They accepted it the way kids do, already moving on to asking if they could bring their tablets. Dylan came out of the guest room looking terrible. His hair stuck up on one side and his eyes were red. He tried to kiss the kids goodbye like it was a normal morning, but our son pulled away. Why does Daddy look sad? He asked me, and I had to swallow all my anger to keep my voice calm. Daddy's just tired, I said. Say goodbye so we can get going. My daughter hugged him, but my son just waved from across the kitchen. Dylan's face crumpled, but I couldn't feel sorry for him. He did this. He chose to say those things out loud where people could hear. Luna's apartment felt like stepping into safety. She had the spare room completely set up with air mattresses for the kids and their favorite snacks already arranged on the dresser. She hugged me the second we walked in, and I finally started crying. 8 years of pretending everything was fine crashed down all at once. The kids ran off to explore the room while I sobbed into my sister's shoulder. She held me tight and didn't say anything, just let me break down in her hallway. My parents showed up right at noon like Luna promised. My father's face was red with anger, and my mother was already crying when I opened the door. They wanted every detail of what Dylan said at the party. Sitting on Luna's couch repeating his words made them sound even worse somehow. The consolation prize comment, the stuck with you part, the admission that I'll never measure up. My mother cried harder with each sentence, and my father's jaw got tighter and tighter. When I finished, he pulled out his phone. I'm calling him right now, my father said. His voice came out cold and controlled, which was way scarier than if he'd been yelling. He put the phone on speaker so we could all hear. Dylan answered on the second ring, sounding nervous. My father didn't waste time on pleasantries. You're not welcome at family events anymore, he said. Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, nothing. You communicate through lawyers from now on. You don't call my daughter unless it's about the kids. You don't show up at family gatherings. You made your choice at that party and now you live with the consequences. Dylan tried to interrupt, but my father just hung up. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand while Luna sat beside me looking fierce and protective. My phone started buzzing before my father even set his down. Dylan's name flashed across the screen over and over. I let it ring out 3 times before the text started flooding in. Your dad threatened me. This is insane. You need to call him off. I'm still your husband. We can work this out if you stop making everything so dramatic. Each message blamed me for making this a big deal. Like his confession at the party was somehow my fault for having feelings about it. I took screenshots of every single one and sent them to Luna without saying anything. She read them and her face got hard. He's digging his own grave, she said quietly. My mother suggested turning off my phone for the night, but I wanted to see what else Dylan would say. The texts kept coming for another 20 minutes, getting angrier as I didn't respond. You're turning everyone against me. Your family always loved you more anyway. Luna's probably thrilled to finally have drama to post about. That last one made Luna actually laugh out loud. Does he think I'm going to Instagram his midlife crisis? She asked nobody in particular. The doorbell rang around 7 and Luna went to answer it. Marissa stood there holding 2 bottles of wine and a bag of Chinese takeout, looking worried. I heard through Sarah, who heard from her husband who works with Dylan, she said as she came inside. I figured you could use some company and actual food. She hugged me tight and I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Luna got plates while Marissa poured wine and told us what was going around the neighborhood. Half our street apparently knew what happened at the party, because Brett's wife had been very vocal about what she witnessed. She told at least 5 people at yoga this morning, Marissa said. Everyone's talking about how Dylan called you a consolation prize right in front of his coworkers. Marissa looked furious on my behalf. Brett's wife said she's never been so uncomfortable at a work event, and she used to be a public defender. My parents had left by then, but Luna stayed at the table with us, eating fried rice and occasionally checking her phone. Dylan tried calling her twice, and she just declined both calls without even looking bothered. The kids came out of the spare room asking for dinner, and I realized I'd been so caught up in everything that I hadn't fed them properly. Luna heated up chicken nuggets while I sat them down at her kitchen table. My daughter asked when we were going home, and I knew I couldn't keep saying we were just visiting. Luna pulled up a chair and helped me find the right words. Sometimes grown-ups realize they need to live in different houses for a while, I told them carefully. It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. You're going to stay here with me and Mommy for a bit, Luna added. And you'll still see Daddy, just at different times. My son asked if this was because Daddy was sad earlier, and I had to explain that this was about grown-up stuff that had nothing to do with them. Luna was better at this than me, keeping her voice cheerful and normal while my throat kept closing up. They accepted it easier than I expected and went back to their tablets after eating. Kids are weirdly resilient sometimes. Dylan's parents called while I was tucking the kids into their air mattresses. Luna grabbed my phone before I could even reach for it and answered herself. She's not ready to talk to you yet, Luna said firmly. There was loud talking on the other end, and Luna's expression didn't change. I understand you're upset, but your son publicly humiliated his wife at a company party. Luna listened for a minute, then her eyebrows went up. I could hear Dylan's mother crying in the background, saying she raised him better than this, her voice high and shaky. Luna told them I would call when I was ready and not before, then hung up. They wanted to come over and talk this through, Luna explained. I told them absolutely not. My hands were shaking and I felt grateful she'd intercepted. I wasn't ready to hear whatever excuses they'd prepared for their son. Henry called around 9, apologizing for the late hour. Marissa told me what happened and I wanted to offer some legal perspective, he said. I put him on speaker, so Luna could hear too. Henry explained that Dylan's public confession about marrying me as a consolation prize could actually matter in divorce proceedings, especially regarding claims of emotional abuse. His firm had connections to several good family law attorneys if I wanted a referral. The fact that he said these things in front of witnesses at a work event makes it documented, Henry continued. It's not just your word against his. I felt something shift in my chest hearing him lay it out so practically. This wasn't just hurt feelings or a bad marriage. This was something with legal weight. Henry gave me 3 names to call and told me not to wait. The sooner you establish representation, the better, he said. Luna was already writing down the names and numbers before I could even process what was happening. Jamaica's office was downtown, in a building with marble floors and expensive art. I met with her 2 days later, leaving the kids with Luna. Jamaica was maybe 50, with gray hair cut sharp and direct eyes that didn't miss anything. She asked me to tell her everything from the beginning, and I walked through the whole night, from the Christmas party to Dylan's texts to my father's call. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. His words constitute a pattern of emotional abuse, she said without any softening. The consolation prize comment, the comparisons to your sister, the admission he married you to get closer to her. She tapped her pen against her notepad. Are there other examples throughout your marriage? Things you might have dismissed as jokes or normal marital friction? Sitting in Jamaica's office with her looking at me so directly, I started remembering things I'd pushed down or explained away. Dylan suggesting I try Luna's workout routine because she looked so toned. Him asking why I couldn't dress more like Luna when we had events to attend. The joke he made about our kids getting lucky with genetics, implying they could have turned out like me instead. Each memory felt like waking up from fog, seeing patterns I'd been living inside without recognizing them as wrong. There was the time he showed me Luna's Instagram, and said he wished I'd put that much effort into my appearance. The Christmas 2 years ago when he spent the whole day at my parents' house following Luna around with his eyes while I tried to pretend I didn't notice. His suggestion that we vacation where Luna was traveling, so we could meet up with her, like that was a normal thing to want. Jamaica wrote everything down and her face got harder with each example. This is textbook emotional abuse through comparison, she said when I finished. He's been undermining your self-worth systematically. I felt sick realizing how much I'd normalized, how many times I'd told myself I was being sensitive or jealous. Dylan showed up at Luna's apartment unannounced 3 days after I moved in. I was making lunch for the kids when the doorbell rang and Luna went to answer it. I heard his voice immediately. I need to see my kids. Luna's response was calm but firm. You need to arrange visits through proper channels now. You don't just show up expecting access. I moved to where I could see the doorway. Dylan looked terrible, unshaven and rumpled, but I couldn't feel sorry for him anymore. Let me in, he demanded. This is between me and my wife. Luna actually laughed. Your wife is my sister and you're not coming in here. The confrontation escalated fast. Dylan accused Luna of poisoning me against him, his voice getting louder. You've always wanted this, he said. You've always been jealous that I chose her over you. Luna's laugh was genuine and cutting. You managed to poison her against you all by yourself at that Christmas party. I didn't have to do anything. She crossed her arms and blocked the doorway more completely. You stood in front of your coworkers and called her a consolation prize. You told her she'll never measure up. That's all you. Dylan tried to push past her, but Luna held her ground. The kids appeared behind me asking what was happening, and I turned them back toward the spare room. Go watch your show, I told them. Daddy's just leaving. Ezekiel called me directly that evening after Dylan left. His voice had that fake friendly tone men use when they're trying to smooth things over. Boys will be boys, he started. Dylan had too much to drink and said some things he didn't mean. I felt anger replace the numbness I'd been carrying. Dylan was sober enough to articulate 8 years of settling for second best, I told him. He was sober enough to explain his whole strategy of dating me because Luna was too young. He meant every word. Ezekiel tried the reasonable approach next. suggesting we all sit down and talk this through like adults. I told him talking time was over and hung up before he could respond. Luna high-fived me from across the room. 3 days later, I drove back to the house while Dylan was at work to get more clothes and toys for the kids. Walking through the front door felt wrong, like I was trespassing in someone else's home instead of the place I'd lived for 8 years. The living room still had our family photos on the walls and the couch we'd picked out together, but everything looked different now, like props in a play about someone else's life. I moved through each room gathering things for the kids, opening closets and drawers I'd organized myself, touching furniture we'd saved up to buy. The kitchen had the coffee maker Dylan used every morning and my favorite mug still sitting in the dish rack. I packed the kids' winter coats from the hall closet and grabbed their favorite stuffed animals from their beds. My daughter's room had drawings taped to the walls, and my son's had his collection of toy cars lined up on the shelf. I took photos of their rooms on my phone, so I could try to make Luna's spare room feel more like home for them. In our bedroom, I started pulling clothes from my side of the closet, and that's when I noticed Dylan's nightstand drawer was slightly open. I knew I shouldn't look, but I pulled it open anyway. Inside was his old leather journal from college that I'd seen him write in years ago, but thought he'd stopped using. The first page I opened to was dated 3 months after we started dating. He'd written about a family barbecue at my parents' house where Luna wore a sundress and how he couldn't stop watching her. The entry said she was the one that got away, and I was good enough for now until he could figure out a better plan. I sat down hard on the bed and kept reading. Page after page of entries about Luna mixed in with entries about me, and the contrast was brutal. When he wrote about Luna, he used words like captivating and magnetic and perfect. When he wrote about me, he used words like practical and safe and acceptable. There was an entry from the week he proposed to me where he wrote about how marrying me was the smart move, because it kept him connected to Luna and my parents liked him. He actually wrote out a plan for how being my husband would give him more access to family events where Luna would be. I took photos of every page with my phone, my hands shaking so hard I had to retake several shots. This wasn't just drunk talk at a Christmas party. This was 8 years of calculated settling written down in his own handwriting. I shoved the journal back in the drawer and finished packing as fast as I could, desperate to get out of that house. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt more like a war meeting than a family meal. Luna came with me for support, and my parents had already set the table with extra food like they were preparing for a long discussion. My father barely let me sit down before he started talking about taking Dylan for everything in the divorce. My mother agreed, saying I deserved every penny after what he'd done. I tried to explain that I just wanted out and fair custody of the kids, but my father kept interrupting with ideas about how to maximize my settlement. Luna backed me up, reminding them that dragging things out would be harder on the kids. My mother cried through most of dinner, apologizing for not seeing what Dylan was really like. My father wanted to know every detail of what Dylan had said at the party, and I had to repeat it all again. By the time dessert came around, I felt exhausted from rehashing everything. My parents meant well, but their anger was overwhelming when I just wanted to move forward quietly. Back at Luna's apartment that night, my phone started ringing from a number I didn't recognize. I answered and heard Dylan's voice immediately. He was calling from different numbers because I'd blocked his cell. The voicemail he left was apologetic, begging me to talk to him. An hour later, another call came from a different number, and this voicemail was angry, accusing me of turning everyone against him. Then another call, another number, back to apologetic. Jamaica told me to save every single voicemail and text for documentation. She said the pattern of harassment would matter in court, especially the way he kept changing between sorry and hostile. I started a folder on my phone just for Dylan's messages, and it filled up fast. Marissa stopped by Luna's place with coffee and news from the neighborhood. She'd heard through Brett's wife that several people at Dylan's company had complained to HR about his comments at the Christmas party. Apparently, Dylan had a reputation at work for talking about Luna in ways that made people uncomfortable. Brett got pulled into HR to give a statement about what he'd witnessed, and other coworkers came forward with their own stories. One woman said Dylan had shown her Luna's social media photos and made inappropriate comments. Another said he'd compared his wife unfavorably to his sister-in-law at multiple company events. Marissa said the whole office was talking about it, and Dylan's boss was not happy. I felt sick knowing his obsession with Luna had been so obvious to his coworkers while I'd been at home thinking our marriage was normal. The kids needed help processing everything, so I enrolled them in temporary counseling through their school. The counselor was kind and experienced with children of divorce. After their first session, she told me they were doing okay overall, but my son kept asking if Daddy stopped loving Mommy. That question broke my heart because I didn't know how to explain that Daddy never loved Mommy the way he should have. The counselor said it was normal for kids to worry the parent who left might stop loving them too. She gave me scripts for how to reassure them that both parents loved them even though we couldn't live together anymore. My daughter seemed to be handling things better, but she'd started having nightmares about our family breaking apart. Dylan's mother reached out through Luna, asking if we could meet for coffee without Dylan knowing. I didn't want to, but Luna said she'd sounded genuinely devastated on the phone. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near Luna's apartment. I figured I owed her nothing, but maybe hearing her out would give me some closure. The coffee shop meeting was harder than I expected. Dylan's mother was already crying when I walked in, her eyes red and puffy like she'd been crying for days. We hadn't even ordered coffee yet, and she was apologizing through tears. She said she'd suspected Dylan had an unhealthy interest in Luna, but convinced herself marriage and kids would fix it. I ordered us both coffee while she composed herself enough to talk. She told me about noticing little things over the years, like how Dylan's eyes would follow Luna at family gatherings, or how he'd find excuses to sit near her at holiday dinners. She'd mentioned it to Ezekiel once, and he'd told her she was imagining things. I listened while she cried and apologized, feeling oddly detached from the whole conversation. Then Dylan's mother told me something that made everything worse. She said Ezekiel had pushed Dylan to marry me quickly because he thought I was stable and would settle him down. Her exact words were that Ezekiel saw me as good wife material who would keep Dylan on track. She apologized for not speaking up when she noticed Dylan staring at Luna during our wedding reception. She apologized for not warning me when she overheard Dylan talking about Luna to his brother. She apologized for all the time she stayed quiet because she wanted to believe her son was better than his behavior showed. I thanked her for telling me and left the coffee shop feeling even more betrayed than before. I made an appointment with Callista Brooks, a therapist who works with people dealing with betrayal in relationships. Her office was calm and comfortable with soft lighting and tissues on every surface. Our first session was mostly me crying while she listened and took notes. I told her everything from the Christmas party confession to finding Dylan's journal to learning his own mother knew something was wrong. Callista didn't try to minimize anything or rush me through my feelings. She said discovering your marriage was built on being someone's second choice was genuinely traumatic, and I needed to let myself grieve. She explained that I wasn't just grieving the end of my marriage, but also grieving the marriage I thought I had for 8 years. By the end of the session, I felt exhausted, but also validated in a way I hadn't felt since this whole nightmare started. Callista gave me homework to start journaling about my feelings, and we scheduled weekly appointments going forward. 2 weeks after starting therapy, I got an email from Jamaica with an attachment labeled counter petition. Dylan had filed his own divorce paperwork claiming we had problems we couldn't fix and asking for equal custody of the kids. I sat at Luna's kitchen table staring at the document while she made coffee. Jamaica called an hour later explaining this was normal, that most divorces involved both sides filing papers, but we needed to respond by documenting Dylan's pattern of putting me down and comparing me to Luna. She asked me to write down every instance I could remember of him making me feel less than. I started a list that evening and filled 3 pages before I had to stop because my hand was shaking. The kids were scheduled for their first overnight at the house with Dylan the following Friday. I packed their bags twice, unpacking and repacking because I kept forgetting things or second-guessing what they needed. Luna found me sitting on the floor of her spare room surrounded by stuffed animals and clothes. She helped me finish packing and reminded me Dylan had taken care of them before, that one night wouldn't hurt them. But when I dropped them off Friday evening, watching them walk into the house with their little backpacks, I felt sick. I drove back to Luna's apartment and paced for 3 hours straight. Luna tried to distract me with a movie, but I couldn't sit still. I checked my phone every 5 minutes even though I knew Dylan wouldn't call unless something was wrong. I barely slept that night, lying awake imagining worst-case situations. When I picked them up Saturday morning, they seemed happy and normal. My daughter showed me a drawing she made, and my son talked about the pancakes Dylan made for breakfast. But then my daughter asked why we couldn't all live together if Daddy promised to be nicer. I told her sometimes grown-ups need to live separately even when they love their kids very much. But the question stayed with me all weekend. On Monday, Luna showed me a message she got from someone claiming to be Dylan's friend. The message said she was breaking up a family by being too hot, that she should be ashamed of herself for coming between a husband and wife. Luna screenshot the whole thing and posted it with a long caption about how men who blame women for their own bad behavior are showing exactly why they can't be trusted. She talked about how Dylan made his choices, and his words at that Christmas party were his responsibility, not hers. The post started getting shared within hours. I saw it had hundreds of comments by Tuesday morning and felt worried about all the attention. Luna came home from a photo shoot and found me scrolling through the responses. I told her I was scared this would make everything worse, that Dylan would get angry about being exposed like this. She sat down next to me and grabbed my phone, closing the app. She reminded me Dylan made this public when he said those things at his work party in front of his colleagues. She wasn't going to hide what he did just to protect his reputation when he clearly didn't care about mine. I had my weekly appointment with Callista on Wednesday, and spent most of the session talking about the kids. I told her I was scared Dylan would compare them to any children Luna might have someday, that he'd make them feel like backup options the way he made me feel. Callista listened and then asked me what I could control in this situation. I said nothing, that I couldn't control what Dylan said or did. She nodded and explained that I was right. I couldn't control Dylan's behavior, but I could model good self-worth for my kids. I could show them what it looked like to value yourself and demand respect. She gave me homework to practice positive self-talk when the kids were around, to let them see me being kind to myself. Jamaica filed our response to Dylan's petition on Thursday morning. She included detailed records of Dylan's pattern of comparing me to Luna, using examples from the list I'd written plus testimony from family members who witnessed his behavior over the years. Dylan's attorney called Jamaica that afternoon and she put him on speaker so I could hear. He called our response inflammatory and exaggerated, said we were painting Dylan as some kind of villain when he was just a man going through a divorce. Jamaica told him emotional abuse through constant negative comparisons was documented and real, then hung up. I sat in her office feeling angry that Dylan's lawyer could dismiss years of hurt like it was nothing. Marissa texted me Friday inviting me to her place for girls' night. She said Luna was coming and a few other friends, that I needed to laugh and remember who I was outside of this divorce mess. I almost said no because I was tired, but Luna convinced me to go. We showed up at Marissa's house with wine and found her living room full of women I'd known for years but barely seen since my marriage. They hugged me and told me they'd heard what happened, that they were sorry I was going through this. We ate snacks and drank wine, and someone told a story about their own terrible ex that had us all crying from laughter. Marissa's friend from work did impressions of bad dates she'd been on, and I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. They reminded me I was funny when I told a story about the kids, that I was smart when I explained a graphic design project, that I was interesting beyond just being Dylan's wife. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. My phone buzzed at 2 in the morning with an email notification. I grabbed it thinking something was wrong with the kids, but it was from Dylan. The subject line said, "Please read," and the message was long, filling my entire screen when I opened it. He apologized for everything, said he'd been awful and he knew it now. He begged for another chance, promised he'd go to therapy and never mention Luna again. But as I read through the email, I counted 3 separate times he referenced how beautiful Luna was, how he understood why I felt compared to her, how hard it must be having such a gorgeous sister. He didn't even see what he was doing, couldn't write an apology without bringing her up. I forwarded the email to Jamaica without responding. The court assigned us a mediator the following week to work out custody arrangements. Her name was Lena Chase, and she had an office downtown with toys in the corner and family photos on her desk. She shook both our hands when we arrived and explained her job was to help us figure out what worked best for the kids, not to take sides in our marriage problems. Dylan and I sat in chairs across from each other while Lena asked questions about our work schedules and the kids' routines. She was calm and practical, writing notes while we talked. When we got to discussing holidays, Dylan suggested the kids spend Christmas with him at his parents' house like normal. I looked at him across that office and said nothing was normal anymore, that we needed to split holidays fairly now. Lena nodded and started explaining how alternating years worked for major holidays. Dylan's face crumpled right there across from me. His shoulders started shaking and tears ran down his cheeks while Lena sat quietly with her pen hovering over her notepad. He pressed his hands against his eyes and made these awful choking sounds that might have moved me 2 months ago. Lena let him cry for maybe 30 seconds before she spoke again, her voice still calm and measured. She told him she understood this was difficult, but she needed to point something out. "Love requires respect," she said, and his public confession at that Christmas party showed a basic lack of respect for his wife. She asked him if he could see that, and he nodded while wiping his face with his sleeve. I sat there watching him fall apart, and felt absolutely nothing except tired. We finished the session with a basic schedule outline, and I drove back to Luna's apartment feeling like I'd been awake for 3 days straight. The kids were playing in the living room when I walked in, and my son looked up at me with these worried eyes. He asked if I'd seen Daddy, and I told him yes. We'd had a meeting about schedules. My daughter climbed into my lap and asked if Daddy was sad because of them. The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I held her close and explained very carefully that grown-up problems are never ever the fault of children, that Mommy and Daddy both love them more than anything. She hugged me tight and whispered that she loves me the most in the whole world, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom where I cried so hard I had to run water so the kids wouldn't hear. Luna knocked on the door after a few minutes and asked if I was okay. I splashed cold water on my face and came out to find her making the kids grilled cheese sandwiches. She told me she had something to ask me later when the kids were in bed. That night, after I got them settled in the spare room, Luna poured us both wine and told me about a work event coming up where she was honored for her marketing success. She wanted me to come with her, said it would be good for me to get out and do something that wasn't about the divorce. I almost said no because going to Luna's glamorous work event sounded exhausting, but she gave me this look that said she really wanted me there. I agreed and she hugged me, then started talking about what I should wear and how excited she was for me to meet some of her colleagues. The event was at this nice hotel downtown with a big ballroom and people in cocktail dresses everywhere. Luna looked amazing in a silver dress that caught the light, and I watched her work the room like she was born to do it. She introduced me to people as her sister, and they actually seemed interested in talking to me. A woman from a tech startup asked about my work, and I mentioned graphic design. And suddenly we were having this whole conversation about branding and visual identity. Another guy wanted to know if I did freelance work and gave me his card. I realized standing there in that ballroom that I'd been defining myself through Dylan's view of me for so long that I'd forgotten I had my own skills and interests. People weren't comparing me to Luna. They were just talking to me like I was interesting on my own. Jamaica called 3 days later to tell me Dylan's attorney had sent over a settlement proposal. She walked me through it over the phone and I kept waiting for the catch. But it was actually fair. 50-50 custody with alternating holidays, assets split down the middle, college funds for the kids protected and shared. Jamaica said in her professional opinion we should accept it and move forward rather than dragging things out in court. I told her I'd think about it and call her back. I spent that night going over the proposal at Luna's kitchen table, reading each line carefully. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was just about ending this chapter, so I could start figuring out what came next. I called Jamaica the next morning and told her to accept the terms. She scheduled a time for me to come sign everything at her office. My hand shook when I picked up the pen, and Jamaica put the settlement agreement in front of me with little sticky tabs marking where I needed to sign. I went through each page slowly, my signature getting messier as I went because my hand wouldn't stop trembling. Jamaica witnessed everything and made copies, then shook my hand and told me she was proud of how I'd handled all this. I walked out of her office feeling strange and empty, like I'd just closed a door on 8 years of my life. My next therapy session with Callista focused on processing what she called anticipatory grief. She explained that I was mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the loss of 8 years that were built on Dylan's fantasy of someone else. I told her it felt like wasted time and she stopped me right there. "Those years gave you your children," she said, "and they taught you exactly what you won't accept going forward. That's not wasted, that's information." She gave me homework about listing my boundaries for future relationships, and I left her office feeling slightly less hollow. Marissa called that weekend with news that Dylan's company had quietly moved him to a different department. She'd heard from a friend who worked there that the HR investigation into his workplace behavior had turned up multiple complaints. Several women reported feeling uncomfortable with how he talked about women in general, and Luna specifically. I thanked Marissa for telling me and felt a grim satisfaction that there were actual consequences for once. I started looking at apartments the following week, scrolling through listings on my phone during the kids' bedtime. Luna offered to help with the deposit, but my parents insisted on covering it as a fresh start gift. I found a place in a neighborhood near good schools with a park just 2 blocks away. It was small, but it was mine, with 2 bedrooms so the kids could each have their own space. The landlord showed me around and I could picture our life there, something separate from Dylan and all his comparisons. I filled out the application that same day. The lease approval came through faster than expected, and suddenly I was signing paperwork for my own apartment, my first place living independently since college. I sat in the empty living room after getting the keys, looking at bare walls and clean carpet, and felt this weird mix of complete terror and genuine excitement about what came next. Moving day came 3 weeks later, and I loaded boxes into Luna's borrowed SUV, while the kids bounced around asking if they could pick their own wall colors. My son wanted his room blue like the ocean, and my daughter insisted on purple with glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. We spent the first afternoon unpacking clothes and books, the kids racing between their new rooms, comparing closet sizes and window views. My son dragged his favorite dinosaur bedspread onto his mattress and announced this felt like a camping adventure, which made me laugh and want to cry at the same time. Luna showed up with pizza and helped us assemble furniture from boxes, her electric screwdriver making quick work of bed frames while I sorted kitchen supplies. By nighttime, the apartment still looked half empty, but it was ours. Nobody else's voice in my head about paint colors or furniture placement. That Friday, Dylan texted asking for the new address and what time he should pick up the kids for his first custody weekend. I sent him the information with no extra words, keeping everything factual and brief. He arrived exactly on time Saturday morning, standing in the hallway outside my door instead of trying to come inside. The kids grabbed their overnight bags and hugged me goodbye while Dylan looked everywhere except at my face. He asked if they had everything they needed, and I confirmed they did, then watched them walk down the hall toward the elevator. The whole exchange took maybe 3 minutes and felt stiff and uncomfortable, but also like progress, like we were figuring out how to exist in each other's orbit without the old patterns. Luna came over Sunday afternoon with paint samples and we spread them across my bedroom floor, comparing different shades of sage green that Dylan had always vetoed as too bold. We picked the darkest one and spent hours rolling it onto the walls while music played from her phone. She told me about all the tiny compromises I used to make, things I had stopped noticing, like always ordering what Dylan wanted at restaurants or watching his preferred shows on TV. I realized how much of myself I had folded away to avoid his comparisons, how I had made myself smaller hoping that would be enough. Luna said I was going to rediscover who I was without his voice telling me I was less than, and something about the way she said it made me believe her. My therapy session with Callista that week focused on rebuilding my sense of self-worth separate from anyone else's opinion. She gave me homework to write down 20 things I liked about myself that had nothing to do with appearance or how I compared to other people. I sat in my new apartment that night staring at a blank page, realizing how hard it was to think of myself outside that framework. Eventually, I wrote things like I was good at solving problems and I made my kids feel safe, and I could draw detailed illustrations for work projects. Callista reviewed my list the following week and pointed out how many of my positive traits involved helping others, asking what I valued about myself just for me. The question felt strange and difficult in a way that showed me how much work I still needed to do. I started reaching out to old friends from college that I had drifted away from during my marriage, sending texts to people I had not talked to in years. One friend invited me for coffee, and we sat in a cafe for 3 hours catching up. She told me she had always felt like Dylan did not really appreciate me, but had not known how to say it without seeming jealous or judgmental. Another friend admitted the same thing over lunch the following week, saying she noticed how Dylan would tune out when I talked about my work, but perk up whenever Luna was mentioned. Hearing that other people had seen what I could not see made me feel both validated and foolish for missing the signs so long. The kids settled into the 2-home routine faster than I expected, treating it like an adventure rather than a tragedy. My daughter told me one morning that she liked having 2 bedrooms and 2 sets of toys, which made me laugh and cry while making her breakfast. They started decorating both spaces with their artwork and favorite stuffed animals, creating little territories that felt like theirs. I worried constantly about how the separation was affecting them, but they seemed okay, asking practical questions about schedules rather than emotional ones about why Daddy left. Dylan showed up for another kid exchange a few weeks later and tried making small talk about how nice my apartment looked. I thanked him briefly and kept the conversation focused on the kids' homework and upcoming school events. I recognized that I did not owe him friendship or warmth, just functional co-parenting that kept things stable for our children. He looked like he wanted to say more, but I excused myself to grab the kids' jackets. keeping the boundary firm. 6 months after that devastating Christmas party, I sat in my own apartment on a random Tuesday morning drinking coffee and looking out at the park 2 blocks away. The grief was still there, this heavy thing I carried around about 8 years that felt wasted, but it was sharing space with something else now. Genuine hope, maybe? Or just the absence of constant comparison and criticism. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I could breathe fully instead of holding myself small and compressed. The divorce was not finalized yet, and co-parenting had its awkward moments, but I was building something real here, something that was actually mine. Luna came over for dinner that Friday with ingredients for tacos, and we cooked together while music played from the kitchen speaker. My daughter danced around spinning in circles, and my son helped Luna chop tomatoes with a plastic knife. This was what family actually looked like, I realized while watching them laugh together. People who chose to love you and show up for you, not people who settled for you while wishing for someone else. We ate at my small dining table that barely fit 4 people and talked about nothing important, just silly stories and weekend plans. Luna told the kids about a photo shoot where the photographer's dog had stolen her sandwich, and they giggled so hard my son nearly choked on his drink. After dinner, we played board games until the kids started yawning. Then Luna helped me get them ready for bed. She hugged me before leaving and told me she was proud of how far I had come in 6 months, and I believed her because I could feel it too. I started dating casually a few weeks later. Nothing serious, but enjoying conversations with people who seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. One guy I met for coffee asked detailed questions about my graphic design work and listened attentively while I explained a recent project. I realized halfway through describing it that I was starved for this kind of basic respect, someone actually caring about what I did and thought. He did not compare me to anyone or make me feel like I was taking up too much space by talking. The date did not lead anywhere romantic, but it showed me what normal interactions could feel like, how people could be interested without agenda or comparison. I went home that night and added to my list for Callista, writing that I was interesting and my work mattered and I deserved people who recognized that. The divorce paperwork came through on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later while I was drinking coffee at my kitchen table. My phone buzzed with an email from the court system showing the final decree, all official stamps and legal language declaring my marriage dissolved. Jamaica called 10 minutes later to congratulate me, her voice warm but professional, and I felt this weird mix of relief and sadness sitting there alone in my quiet apartment. The relief made sense, but the sadness surprised me. Not because I wanted Dylan back, but because 8 years of my life were now officially labeled as a mistake in legal documents. I thanked Jamaica for everything and hung up, then sat staring at my coffee cup for a while before getting ready for my therapy appointment. Callista's office felt familiar now after months of sessions, the soft couch and tissue box and her calm presence becoming this safe space where I could say things out loud that felt too big to keep inside. She told me I had made remarkable progress since that first session, where I could barely talk without crying, moving from devastation to acceptance to actually building a real life for myself. The healing would not be linear, she reminded me, and there would still be hard days ahead when old wounds ached or loneliness felt heavy, but I had proven to myself that I could handle difficult things and come out stronger. I left her office feeling lighter, like someone had given me permission to stop carrying around guilt about the divorce or shame about being fooled for so long. My parents hosted a dinner that Friday night at their house, calling it a new beginning celebration, even though I told them it felt weird to celebrate a divorce. Luna came with a bottle of wine and Marissa brought her whole family, and we crowded around my parents' dining table like we had for holidays, except this time the focus was on me moving forward, instead of pretending everything was fine. My father stood up halfway through dinner and raised his glass, his voice getting thick with emotion as he toasted to my strength and courage for choosing myself over a marriage that never valued me properly. My mother started crying happy tears, and Luna squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt genuinely supported by people who saw my worth, instead of comparing me to someone else. The kids ran around playing with Marissa's children after dinner, their laughter filling the house with normal family chaos that had nothing to do with divorce or adult problems. I tucked them into bed later that night back at our apartment, my son in his dinosaur pajamas, and my daughter clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. My son looked up at me with serious eyes and asked if I was happy now, his small voice worried like he had been thinking about this question for a while. I sat on the edge of his bed and told him yes, I really was happy, not because the divorce was easy or fun, but because I learned I was worth more than being someone's second choice. He thought about that for a minute, then hugged me tight, his skinny arms wrapping around my neck as he whispered that I was his first choice. I held him close and felt something settle in my chest, this understanding that his ranking was the only one that ever really mattered.